Hello and welcome to Skyline's first episode, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dhruti Athri. Now, tonight we are looking at 13 stories that are all connected by one bigger picture: the changing lives of Indians, immigrants, students, workers, and families moving between India, America, and the wider world. And tonight, America is kind of sending a very different signal here. On one side, employers are being asked to pay more just to keep the foreign workers. On the other side, Canada is trying to attract the same talent. So let's start with what exactly is happening. Well, a number is suddenly becoming very, very important for Indian professionals in America: $4,000. And for L1 workers, $4,500. Ladies and gentlemen, according to the reports, a new Department of Homeland Security rule taking effect on September 9, 2026 extends the 9/11 response and biometric entry-exit fee to certain same employer H-1B and L-1 extension. So that means a worker does not necessarily have to change the company for the extra cost to appear. You may be staying with the exact same employer, doing the exact same job, living in the exact same city, and the employer may still face a new surcharge when reviewing your status further. Now, here's the important point here. This does not apply to every company. No, DHS uses what the reports call a 50-50 rule. The employer must have at least about 50 workers in the United States, and more than half of that US workforce must be in H-1B, L1A or L1B status. So just imagine a company with 500 American employees, only about 100 are on H-1B or L1 visas. That company would not meet the threshold that is described in this particular rule. But imagine a company where the majority of its US workforce is made up of foreign workers. Now, the whole calculation, it kind of changes. And that is where large tech companies, in fact, along with tech companies, there are consulting companies and some India-linked staffing businesses. These all sectors could feel the pressure more strongly now. You know why? Because the cost can multiply very, very quickly. A company filing 100 H-1B extensions could suddenly be looking at $400,000, and that too as an additional fee. 500 extension, $2 million. And remember here, this particular fee, it is described as an employer responsibility, not something the worker should simply be forced just to pay through a salary deduction here. But here comes the bigger question. What happens when sponsoring foreign talent? It gets more expensive. Let's talk about that. Well, companies make calculations. In fact, they ask whether to extend, whether to hire, whether to move a role, whether to reconstruct an entire team. And in the meantime, for the Indian professionals who are trapped in long green card queues further, this is an uncomfortable part of this particular story. Why? Because an H-1B extension, it is often not just another immigration form. It is a bridge keeping a person inside the American workforce. So a higher sponsorship cost, it may eventually influence employer behavior, even if the employee never sees the bill directly. DHS here says that the added money will help fund biometric entry-exit fee. But for the foreign worker, the bigger question that is much more personal: will my company still want to keep sponsoring me 5 years from now? Well, that is a question that is definitely worth watching. And yes, while America is making foreign talent more expensive to retain, another country is watching very, very closely and saying, come here instead. Well, for years, thousands of Indian professionals in America, they have been trapped in the same frustrating cycle. Good job, good salary, good career, but the green card, still far away. And now Canada is trying to turn that frustration into an opportunity here. Well, according to the report, Canada's immigration system is increasingly using the category-based selection to attract highly skilled professionals in STEM. Well, all engineers and technology. And this is where the strategy gets interesting. Instead of saying, here is one giant immigration pool, everyone compete. Here, Canada is saying kind of opposite here. We need these particular skills. Let's find those people, and then we can make a huge difference out of it. Well, a software engineer may have a CRS score that looks really weak as compared with the general express entry draw. But if that same person fits a targeted occupational category, suddenly the calculation changes here. According to reports, roles such as software engineering, maybe data science, maybe there is cloud infrastructure and cyber security. These technical roles, well, they are in demand, and it focuses on an important group. And it focuses on an important group here. H-1B workers who are already living in the US. Can you think about the irony here? America spends years training and employing a skilled Indian professional. Now that professional gets stuck in a green card backlog. And then Canada comes in and says that, hey, look, we may have a faster route for you. According to the report, Canadian H-1B open work permit policy and a December 15, 2026 deadline for extension under that particular framework. For somebody sitting in America and wondering whether they need a backup plan, ladies and gentlemen, Canada can therefore become more than a backup plan here. It can become a second track. And yes, there is an important strategic point here. A person can potentially continue pursuing the US immigration while building a separate Canadian pathway, depending on their individual circumstances here. So that basically means the mindset is changing now. Instead of America or Canada, the question becomes, why not prepare for both of these nations? But yes, there is one catch here. Canada is not handing over permanent residency simply because somebody works in tech. Language score, that also matters. Education assessment matters. Work experience matter. NOC classification, that also matters. And the timing, most importantly, it matters a lot. So the message here is very simple. Don't just look at your score. Look at the category that you fit in, because sometimes immigration is not about having the highest score. It is about being in demand. But yes, while Canada is trying to attract foreign professionals, America is doing something much more uncomfortable. Checking whether those professionals are actually doing the jobs that they claimed. United States is now showing up at the workplaces. And it's a big update, specifically the people who are a fraud. Can you imagine sitting at your desk, you are working, you have your laptop open, you are in the middle of a project, and suddenly somebody from Department of Homeland Security, that person arrives. No, not an email, not a phone call, not a warning, a personal face-to-face visit. Well, according to the reports, USCIS, Fraud Detection and National Security Directorate, or FDNS, has expanded unannounced worksite inspections involving H-1B and L-1 workers. And this matters. Why? Because foreign workers compliance, it is no longer something that only happens inside an immigration lawyer's office. Well, it can now reach the actual workplace just to check whether you're working on the same project or not. In the meantime, the officers may want to verify something very basic. Well, where do you work? Who is your manager? What exactly do you do? What are your working hours? What salary are you receiving? Is the job description the same as the one originally submitted to USCIS? And it's very important to know all these answers. And this becomes particularly very important for consulting companies here. While a worker may technically be employed by company A, but working at client B. And then there is a remote work. You move, your work location changes, your company forgets to update the filing. Everything seems pretty normal to you until an officer arrives at the old location and asks, where is that particular employee? Well, that is when a simple administrative issue, it can suddenly become a legal problem for you. Well, the report also emphasizes the importance of the public access file, which record an accurate job description. And here's the bigger lesson here. Your immigration paperwork needs to watch your real life. Your salary should match the filing. Your role should match the filing. And most importantly, your work location. Well, it should match the filing also. Your employer, that person should be able to explain exactly what you do in that particular office, and that explanation, it should match what you wrote. Let's be honest here. If the paperwork says one thing and the reality says another, the gap, it can attract scrutiny. For employers, the consequences, it can include notices of intent to revoke or maybe serious compliance action too. For employees, a petition problem can become a status problem. And that is why HR teams cannot treat immigration compliance as paperwork sitting in the drawer. Well, the paperwork needs to match the person who's sitting at that particular desk. And yes, that takes us to the workers who aren't sitting at a corporate desk yet, but they are standing at the starting line of their American careers. Well, for an international student graduating from an American university, it can feel like the biggest achievement. You got the degree, you found a job, you got OPT, and then comes the H-1B lottery. And suddenly your entire future, it can depend on one single selection. According to reports, the cap gap system, the protection that can extend certain F1 student status and employment authorization when a timely H-1B petition requesting a change of status is filed. But the journey, it has become more complicated now. The H-1B lottery itself has moved towards a beneficiary-centric model. Wait, let me give you a simple term here. One person should not get multiple lottery advantages simply because different employers registered them. In fact, moving further, the reports explain that passport information or another unique identity document, it is used to prevent multiple registration from artificially increasing somebody's chances here. Now, imagine 3 companies want to hire you. You can potentially submit registrations, but you are still one person. Your passport is still one passport. You do not become 3 separate lottery entries simply because 3 companies are interested in you. And that is intended to make the whole process fairer. But the selection is only the beginning. The employer still has to prove the job is real. The role has to qualify as a specialty occupation. The wage information has to make sense. The company has to demonstrate that the position is genuine and that it can actually employ the worker. And yes, then comes cap gap. If the filing is properly made while the student is eligible, the protection can help bridge the gap between the end of OPT and the start of H-1B status. But one mistake can create a serious problem for you. Travel is another concern here. That's right, according to the report, leaving the US during a pending change of status situation, it can affect your protection. And that is why F1 students need to treat the entire process as one connected chain. OPT, EAD, H-1B registration, employer petition, cap gap, and I-20. Then travel, every link here, it matters a lot to you. You know why? Because for an international student, getting the degree, it may be very difficult. But turning that degree into a permanent American career, that can be even harder. And yes, what happens when that dream job disappears after you finally get it? Well, that brings us to the biggest fear for many foreign tech workers in 2026. The tech industry is changing fast. AI is changing teams. Companies are cutting the cost. More work is moving into global capability centers. And a layoff that looks a financial problem for an American worker, it can become an immigration crisis. Rather, emergency for an H-1B worker, specifically an Indian tech professional. You know why? Because the moment employment ends, the clock that matters. According to report, the existing 60-day H-1B grace period, that is problematic. That window generally gives an eligible worker some kind of time to find another employer, change the status, now where legally that is possible, or prepare to leave the United States entirely. But there is another layer here. The Department of Homeland Security is reviewing a proposal that could change that safety net altogether. So today, the 60-day period, it remains part of that particular framework described in the report. But, ladies and gentlemen, the uncertainty itself is important. Why? Because an H-1B worker cannot afford to treat those 60 days like a vacation here. Well, let me break that down for you. Day 1, layoff. Day 10, resume is sent. Day 20, interviews happening. Day 35, potential employer who's interested in you. Day 45, immigration paperwork, it still is being prepared. Suddenly, the whole calendar that is moving faster than the hiring process, and then you are in the problem. That is why workers need to act very early. That is why workers need to act early. If you get another H-1B employer, portability rules may allow you to begin work after the new petition is properly filed, subject to the legal requirements. CAP exempt organizations can also offer another route, by the way, because universities and certain research institutions operate under different H-1B rules. And some workers may consider a B1 or B2 change of status where there is legally appropriate circumstances. But none of these should be treated like an automatic resume button. The biggest mistake is waiting until day 59 and then asking, what can I do? The better question is, what can I prepare before day 1? Let me help you with that. Keep your I-94. Keep your I-797. Keep your LCA. Keep your employment record. Know your priority date. Know your immigration lawyer. And know which employer can move quickly. Because in 2026, career planning and immigration planning are becoming the same conversation now. And yes, immigration paperwork does not stop there. Even after you secure your job and status, your financial life outside America, it can still bring you face to face with another federal agency, the IRS. You work in America, you earn in dollars, but your life in India continues. Maybe you have an NRE account, an NRO account, a fixed deposit, mutual funds, property, a pension account. Maybe you even hold foreign investment. And then comes the IRS question. Have you reported it? Well, for US tax residents, foreign assets can trigger reporting obligation under FATCA. And one of the biggest areas of confusion is Form 8938 versus FBAR. They are not the same thing. They are filed differently. They cover different categories. And filing one does not automatically replace the another one. According to the reports, FBAR reporting, it can apply when the aggregated value of foreign financial accounts exceeds about $10,000 at any point in the year. Form 8938, it has a different threshold depending on filing status and whether the taxpayer lives in the US or not. And yes, what counts as a foreign asset? Let's talk about that. More than many people realize, bank accounts, fixed deposit, foreign mutual fund, brokerage account, or maybe certain pension in trust, insurance products, and in the end, ownership in foreign entities. So basically, everything that is related to money abroad. So imagine an Indian professional who has been in America for years now, maybe decades, but still has a financial life back home. Every single account, it may be perfectly legitimate. Every rupee may be legally earned. The problem comes if the reporting that is incomplete. Also, the report highlights potentially significant penalties for failing to report certain information. And that is why this is not just a story about hiding money. It is actually the opposite. You can own foreign assets legally. You simply need to understand the reporting rules that come with them. And yes, if you have missed something in previous filing, then what? No, don't panic. Don't simply start filing random amendment forms without any understanding of the issue here. The report also points to official IRS compliance program that may help eligible taxpayers correct certain non-willful reporting failures. Lesson here, very simple. Having foreign asset, it is not a crime. Ignoring the reporting obligation, that can become a problem for you. And yes, for Indians living abroad, there is now another question that goes far beyond visas and taxes. How safe do you actually feel in the country where you live? For years, the Indian diaspora story has been mostly about success. Doctors, engineers, students, entrepreneurs, business owners, professionals who are building lives across America, Canada, Europe, and the Gulf. But now there is another number that we need to talk about. Violence. That's right. According to reports provided to Times XP, official data presented in the parliament, it shows reported violent incidents involving Indian citizens who are living abroad rising sharply between 2021 and 2025, from 15 cases to 104. Now, over that 5-year period, the report says that 302 incidents they were documented across 36 countries and regions. Now, pause here. Now, these numbers do not mean every Indian living abroad is suddenly unsafe. They do not tell us that every incident had the same cause, but they do show something important here. Physical safety has become part of a diaspora conversation further. Ladies and gentlemen, the US recorded the highest total in the report at 33 cases. The UAE followed with 32, the UK had 31, Canada had 30, and Ireland saw a sharp increase in reported crimes. And you know why? Well, the report points towards several pressures here: anti-immigrant rhetoric, housing stress, political polarization, public anger over immigration, and yes, in America, heated debates around foreign workers and H-1B visas. Sometimes political arguments that remain online. Sometimes they spill into real life. And for the students and workers living thousands of kilometers away from their home, that can become deeply unsettling. So the question is, what can we do? Well, know your local emergency number. Know your nearest Indian consulate. Keep your passport and your immigration documents securely back up. Stay connected with local Indian community organizations. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, most importantly, don't ignore any sort of threat. A threat does not become less serious because it happened on social media. The pattern of such events should be documented. A physical threat should be reported, and families back home should know who to contact if something goes wrong. India's government has mechanisms such as consular assistance and Madad system just to support Indians abroad. But the broader lesson, it is personal. Your immigration plan should not only ask, can I work here? It should also ask, can I live here safely? And yes, from the safety of Indians abroad, we move into a completely different kind of American debate. Debate over who should be allowed to vote and what role should identification play in elections. Well, America's voter ID debate has been running for years now. And now, the US President, Mr. Donald Trump, is using India as part of that argument. Mr. Trump has pointed to India's election system and voter identification requirements while pushing support for Safe America Act, legislation aimed at tightening voter registration rule, and that too in federal election. Mr. Trump, well, he has highlighted India's massive 2024 election and emphasis that voters use official identity documents. Well, the political message absolutely clear. If India can require identification, why should not America do the same? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Trump's administration has argued that proof of citizenship and identification, it should be required for federal voters' registration. Well, the proposed legislation also seeks limit on voting by mail, with exceptions under certain circumstances, and would put greater emphasis on removing non-citizen from the voter roll. In the meantime, the supporters, they say that this would strengthen election integrity. But critics argue that the issue is more complicated than simply comparing one country's election system with another's. And that distinction, that matters. Because India and the US has very different election structure. Let's be very honest here. Different federal system, different voter registration rule, different constitutional framework. So when Mr. Trump says, look at India, he's not simply talking about elections. He's making a political argument about how American elections should work. The Indian ambassador to the US, according to the report, has also supported Mr. Trump's comparison and pointed to India's voter ID system. But whether the Save American Act, it actually passes, that is a separate question. Support exists, opposition exists, and Congress, that remains divided. So the real story is not simply America wants Indian-style voter ID. The real story is that India has become a talking point in one of America's biggest domestic political debates. And that is remarkable, Because American politicians, they are now looking at the world's largest democracy and they are saying, what can we learn from India? But yes, while lawmakers debate the rules for voting, federal investigators, they are cracking down on another kind of alleged fraud. Marriages created on paper just for immigration benefit. Well, for some immigrants, the green card dream, it can feel so valuable that people become willing to pay enormous sum for it. And that is exactly where immigration fraud network thrives. According to the reports, ladies and gentlemen, the US Justice Department has targeted a large alleged marriage fraud operation involving more than 1,000 fake marriages and multiple criminal defendants. The reported scheme allegedly arranges marriage between the US citizen and foreign nationals who wanted immigration benefit. Guess what's the price here? Well, the report says that some applicants paid as much as $100,000, and the people arranging the marriages allegedly took commissions out of it. Can you think about that? A marriage, normally one of the most personal decisions of two people, well, it becomes a business transactions. And for what? A US green card. Photos, all staged. Trips are arranged. Family members may be brought into the whole story. Couples made to look very, very genuine. And all of it, it is designed to survive an immigration interview. But the American government, well, they are increasingly looking for inconsistencies here. Where did the couple live? Who paid the rent? Did they actually spend time together? What do they know about each other? Most importantly, what does their financial history show? What does their digital footprint show? Everything is important now. And this is why fraudulent marriage schemes are so risky, because it isn't enough to create a convincing marriage photograph. You have to create an entire life that looks real. And the authorities proved the marriage was fraudulent. The consequences can extend far beyond losing a green card. There can be criminal charges, immigration consequences, deportation, and potentially serious future visa problems as well. According to the report, cases involving Indian nationals allegedly using sham marriages as an immigration shortcut. Well, that is an important warning for anybody who believes that I'll just find a way to get the papers. Because when immigration benefits are obtained through fraud, the shortcuts that can become a trap for you. And yes, from an alleged immigration fraud network, we now move to a deeply disturbing individual case involving an Indian origin doctor in Florida. The next story is deeply disturbing. According to the report, Dr. Chintan Shah, an Indian doctor of Gujarat origin in Florida, he passed away while being held in Alachua County Jail after his July 2026 arrest. The circumstances surrounding the whole incident, they were described as unclear, with jail officials finding him unconscious during a routine check. Medical personnel, they were called, but he was pronounced unresponsive and his trial, it had not yet begun. That is an important distinction here. He had been accused. He had not been convicted. In the meantime, the allegation against him, they were pretty serious, involving the claimed use of artificial intelligence to create and distribute sexual material, along with allegations concerning communications with the minor. According to the report, police had launched an undercover investigation after receiving a tip and later searched his entire residence under a warrant here. In fact, his professional life, it was also affected immediately. According to the report, he had been working as a kidney specialist at a Florida hospital, but after the allegation emerged, he was placed on leave and information about him, it was removed from the hospital's website. The important part of this story is not to sensationalize the allegation. It is the fact that a man facing serious criminal charges, he passed away before the case reached the trial. And that raises question, what happened inside the jail? Was there a medical emergency? Was anybody else involved? What did surveillance footage show? What did the medical examiner conclude? Those answers matters because, if a person passes away in custody, that requires careful investigation, specifically when the person was still legally facing allegations rather than conviction. And for the Indian community in America, the story is another reminder that reputation, professional standing, and legal status. It can change very, very quickly once criminal allegations enter the entire picture. And now let's move from the court to the battlefield, not on the land though, but over the waters surrounding India. India has made another move to strengthen its maritime surveillance. Well, the Defense Ministry has signed $203.4 million agreement with the US-based General Atomics for a 30-month lease for two MQ-9B Sea Guardian drones for the Indian Navy. And you know why it's important? It is important because these are not any ordinary drones. The Sea Guardian is designed for long-duration surveillance over enormous areas. And you know, India's most important strategic geography is maritime. The Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea, the Bay of Bengal, major shipping routes, energy supplies, trade route, and increasingly competition with China. According to the reports, the leased aircraft, it will strengthen India's maritime domain awareness by providing persistent intelligence, surveillance, and other capabilities. And you know, there is a reason the lease is for 30 months. It is a bridge. India has already signed a much larger agreement for 31 MQ-9B system. So this temporary lease that helps fill an operational gap while the larger fleet it is being delivered. Well, the bigger deal, signed in 2024, it covers drones for all three branches of India's military: the Navy, the Army, and the Air Force. The package also includes advanced sensors, weapons, and plans for a maintenance and repair facility here in India. So this is not simply an American product that is being bought by India. It is part of a much bigger military relationship. India gets surveillance, America gets deeper defense partnership, and the Indian Ocean gets another layer of monitoring. Ladies and gentlemen, in a world of submarines, piracy, shipping disruptions, and rising naval competition, information can be as valuable as weapons. You cannot protect what you cannot see, and these systems are designed to help India see much farther. But yes, after talking about million-dollar deals, let's turn to something that affects another group of Indians, NRIs who are returning home with wealth that they built overseas. For years, many Indians who worked in Dubai, America, Singapore, or elsewhere built savings and investment abroad. Then they came back home and a simple question emerged. What happens to a foreign asset if I bought them while I was a non-resident in that particular country? Well, according to the reports, in August 2026, Delhi ITAT ruling involving a foreign life insurance policy purchased while the taxpayer was working in Dubai. Well, the policy later matured after the person had returned to India. Well, the tax department has treated the maturity process as a taxable one and raises issues under India's black money law. The taxpayer challenged that position and the tribunal ruled in his favor on the core issues described in the report. Well, the argument was straightforward, by the way. The original premiums were paid for income earned while the taxpayer was genuinely non-resident. That foreign income was not taxable in India at that point of time. So according to the ruling that was described, you cannot simply take that clean foreign wealth years later and label it as black money just because the asset exists outside India. And you know, that is an important principle here. But wait, here's the catch. Documentation matters a lot here. Bank statements matters. Premium receipt, foreign salary record, proof of residency, Indian tax record, everything. You know why? Because the difference between legitimate foreign wealth and undisclosed foreign wealth, it can come down to whether you can show where the money came from. The report also emphasizes Schedule FA disclosures once a person becomes a resident for whom such reporting is required. So the message for returning NRIs is not you don't have to report anything. The message is understand what you must report and keep proof of where your money came from. Because let's be honest here, if your money is legitimate, well, the stronger defense is often the paper trail that proves it. And finally, we return to the place where so many of tonight's stories began. The US immigration system, where one teeny tiny form date, it can suddenly become a huge deadline. Let's end with something very practical here, a date, September 15, 2026. According to the reports, USCIS is introducing new edition of two major immigration forms, Form I-765 for work authorization and Form I-539 for extending or changing certain non-immigrant statuses. The warning is simple here: use the wrong edition and your application could be rejected. And this is particularly important for people filing EAD renewals, OPT, STEM OPT, or certain H4 related application. The whole report says that there will be no transition period after the new edition takes place. But there is a trap in another direction here too. Don't think you simply can use the new form early. According to the report, the new edition should not be submitted before its effective date either. So the message is that before September 15th, use the version that is valid before September 15th. On or after September 15th, use the new version. That sounds simple to you, right? But immigration filings are full of deadlines where one day matters. And there is another development adding pressure to Indian green card applications. The report says India's EB2 category is unavailable for the remainder of fiscal year 2026, while EB1, India, faces a warning over high demand. That means Indian professionals who are already dealing with long green card waits are entering the end of fiscal year with even more uncertainty. So the question people are asking us is, what should I do? Well, the answer is check your form edition, check your priority date, check the visa bulletin, check your pending I-765 and I-539 applications, and talk to your immigration consul before filing it. Because tonight we have talked about huge geopolitical issues. We talked about drones, we talked about taxes, safety, fake marriages, in fact, Canada, H1B, and layoffs. But sometimes the thing that changes your immigration case is much smaller. Well, a number that is printed at the bottom of the form. It can change your entire life. And that is the final lesson of tonight's show. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dhriti Yatri. This was Skyline, and I'll see you in the next episode.